Okay, now we're going to go over the review for the summative assessment 3.1 to 3.4. So, we look at the first problem. We notice that there is a fraction. So, there's many different ways to deal with problems that have fractions, and we have to decide what the best way is. Now, here, this is only one term. It's grandma and the grandchildren. It's one term. I could distribute, and then it would become two terms. Will I get rid of the fractions by distributing? Well, I will get rid of one fraction by distributing, and I'll create another. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to distribute, because 6 over 5 times 5 over 1, using my superpower, that becomes a 6. Minus 24 fifths over g equals negative 18. Now, I can rewrite this, because remember, when we have a variable that's being subtracted, we want to think the variable's negative, this number's positive. So I'm going to rewrite it as 24 fifths g plus 6 equals negative 18. I know I'm going to subtract a 6. Okay, so this becomes negative 24 fifths g equals a negative plus a negative is a greater negative. Now, I'm going to multiply this. You could do two things. You could multiply it by 5, or I could multiply it by negative 5 over 24. That is the reciprocal, and that makes that 1g. And now when I multiply this by negative 5 over negative 24, again, sorry, there's not two negatives. A negative times a negative is a positive, so I know my answer is a positive. The 24s cancel out, and I get g equals 5. That was one way of doing it. Now, another way that I could have done this is I could have said I'm going to multiply both sides by 5 first before I distribute. We know you only multiply grandma, never the grandchildren. So then I end up with 6 times 5 minus 4g equals negative 90. Now I distribute. 30 minus 24g equals negative 90. Again, I'm still in this situation where I have to realize that my variable is negative and this is a positive number. You can either subtract 30 right away, or if you need to rewrite it to see that you're going to subtract 30, do it that way. A common mistake is to see the negative and think you add 30. But if you want to zero out the 30 and it's already positive, you subtract. So I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides. Negative 24g equals negative 120. Divide by negative 24, divide by negative 24. G equals 5. Okay, so now let's do the check, because we got g equals 5 two times. So I'm going to say 5 minus 4g equal negative 18. 6 over 5. 5 minus 4 times 5 equals negative 18, question mark. Well, 4 times 5 is 20. 5 minus 20 is negative 15. Does that equal negative 18, question mark? Well, I have to actually do the math. This becomes a negative 3. And negative 18 does equal negative 18, check. Okay, so that one worked. Now, let's look at number 2, or B. 2 fifths x minus 4 equals 12. The easiest thing to do here is to remember SADMAP. SADMAP means whenever you have an opportunity to subtract or add before dividing or multiplying or using exponents and parentheses, you should. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides, because now I only have two numbers I have to multiply by 5 to get rid of the fraction. So one way to get rid of the fraction is to multiply by the common denominator, which is 5. I end up with 2x equals 80. Divide by 2, x equals 40. But I didn't have to do it that way. I could have said, well, instead of multiplying both sides by 5, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which you can do when you only have one number on each side. Well, you can do it any time, but it makes sense when there's one number on both sides. Here, when I cross simplify, I get x equals 40 in one step. Okay? Now, you can do the check on your own. Turn to page 34. Now, in this case, by distributing, I'm going to get rid of my fractions. How do I know that? I know that because I look at the denominator. If these numbers are multiples of the denominator, by distributing, you will clear it of fractions. So 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 1 is 5. So I know I should distribute in this case. So this becomes 3x, and I'll do the math over here, negative 16 over 1. I'm going to get rid of that negative and just put it here because I know it's going to be a negative number. 8 goes into 16 twice, 3 times 2 is 6. So it's 3x minus 6 equals, and again, this I'll write down here, 2/5 times 15 over 1. That's a 1, that's a 5. So 2 times 5, 10x minus 2. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. Negative 6 equals 7x minus 2. Add 2 to both sides. And I realize I made a mistake. So if you're all wondering, whoa, what did she do? 5 doesn't go into 15 5 times. 5 goes into 15 3 times. Hope you guys caught that mistake, because I didn't. So that means 2 times 15 is 30, divided by 5 is 6x. So I'm going to erase this and make that a 6x. Good thing I noticed that. So now I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. And I get negative 6 equals 3x minus 2. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I get 3x equals negative 4. Now, a common mistake at this point, some people divide by negative 4 because they're used to dividing by whatever's on the left. But you really divide by whatever's multiplying the variable. So it depends on whether the variable's on the right or the left. So I'm going to divide by 3 to make that equal x. I divide this by 3, and my answer is negative 4/3. Okay? So in this case, we got rid of our fraction by distributing. Now, for number 4, here, there's no way to get rid of these fractions unless we multiply by a common denominator. And a common denominator would be 12. So that means I'm going to multiply this side by 12 and this side by 12. This is easy. This side is a 6. Here, 3 goes into 12 4 times. That becomes 4x. 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. So this becomes 4x plus 9 equals 6. Now, some of you may want to write your multiplication problems over on the side like this. And that's fine. So that becomes a 4. That becomes a 9. Okay? I can manage it here, but some of you will find that confusing. So I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. 4x equals negative 3. Now I'm going to divide by 4 because it's multiplying the x. Divide by 4. X equals negative 3/4. Okay? So in this case, the only way to get rid of the fractions was multiplying by the common denominator. It's confusing because there's many different ways to deal with the fractions. Now, number 5, we have decimals. And to clear an equation of decimals, we multiply by, let's say, the common denominator. We know what the common denominator is by reading these numbers properly. This is 8/10, this is 2/10. If I multiply both sides by 10, I will get rid of decimals. But I'm going to be careful. First of all, I'll put Grandma at the front door. I'm going to be careful because the most common mistake made is not multiplying the numbers without a decimal. Don't think just because one doesn't have a decimal, you don't have to multiply it by 10. Because the golden rule of equations says you have to multiply every term on one side and every term on the other side. So this becomes 8x plus 10 equals 210 minus 2x. So I did get rid of my decimals, but now I have big numbers. But that's okay. I'll deal with the big numbers. I'm going to add 2x to both sides. 10x plus 10 equals 210. Subtract 10. 10x equals 200. Divide by 10. X equals 20. Okay. Now, page 35. Okay, so number 6 is 8x minus 3 times 2x minus 4 equals 17. So I'm going to distribute my negative. Be careful to make this a positive because a negative times a negative is a positive. So 8x minus 6x plus 12 equals 17. 8x and negative 6x is 2x plus 12 equals 17. Subtract 12, subtract 12. 2x equals 5. Divide by 2, divide by 2. X equals 5 halves. Okay, so I think the next few problems are pretty similar. Number 8, you're going to end up with no solution because your variable is going to disappear and it's not going to be a true statement. Okay, for number 9, we have to define our unknowns, write an equation, and solve. So I'm going to let n equal a number. And it says twice the number increased by 12 is equal to 31 less than 3 times the number. Well, 3 times the number is 3n minus 31. Remember, less than means write what comes after less than first, and in this case, it's less than 3 times the number. So now I subtract 2n from both sides. 12 equals n minus 31. Add 31. N equals 43. Okay. Now, for number 10, it's a perimeter of a rectangle. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to have W plus 3, W plus 3, W, and perimeter is 24. So I know I'm going to add all 4 sides together to get my perimeter. So 1W, 2W, 3W, 4W plus 6 equals 24, minus 6, 4W equals 18, divide by 4, W equals 4.5, and that makes the length 7.5, because 4.5 plus 3 is 7.5. Okay. So, number 11. Okay, I think we're going to stop the video and put number 11 on another video.